And we are here for episode 2 of the Big Time Sports Podcast Show. I am Mitch Spinell along with Mitchell Balla. A new episode here after the first one was in the books earlier this week. Mitchell, it's good to be back with you again. And I'm happy to continue the show after some of the good reception we got from our inaugural podcast.
Yeah, no, very happy to be back. And look at that. We didn't get canceled after one show. So I'd say that's progress on our part. And that means bigger and better things to come. But can you believe that it's just been 3 days since we recorded and we have some big things to talk about today?
Absolutely. Charlie and the company decided to not fire us yet, so we're going to get into many more topics this week. And once again, thank you all for listening wherever you are listening, whether it's Spotify, Anchor. Anchor's the big one because we're going to be publishing out to more platforms very soon, so we thank you all for listening there. If you're watching us here on the Big Time Sports Podcast Show YouTube channel, once again, thank you for giving us some viewership there. So we want to start off with the topic that is making the rounds very recently, actually, a couple minutes ago, right before we came on the air, Mitch. You were the one who brought it up to me because it was 2 minutes after many numerous notable NFL reporters were able to break the news that is a report as of now. It's nothing official as of yet, but it looks to be that the National Football League is fighting back after its ruling of Deshaun Watson. First of all, we were on the thing right before Deshaun Watson's announcement got made on Monday.
Correct.
6 games is the official suspension that was judged by the arbiter, Sue Robinson. And now it looks like the NFL took the 3 days that it needed, less than 3 days, to make a potential appeal. And now they are. So it looks like we might be having more of a fight between Watson and the league. Give me your immediate thoughts on that.
My immediate thought is I was hopeful as a Browns fan there would be no appeal because this has been a messy situation all season long for both sides, right? Actually, all three parties involved. You have Deshaun Watson's camp, you have the Cleveland Browns, and us fans who are really held hostage. And we'll get into that later because I've had some thoughts over the past few days talking with friends that are fans of other NFL franchises that want to act like I'm the one who traded for Deshaun Watson when last time I checked, Mitch, I am not general manager of the Cleveland Browns, so I did not make that trade. At the same time, though, like you just said, Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, two of the most notable, if not the most notable NFL reporters out there when it comes to this sort of information, have both tweeted out that the NFL is going to appeal Deshaun's suspension. And per the NFL PR guy on Twitter, Roger Goodell will determine who will hear that appeal. So contrary to a lot of people's beliefs, it will not be Roger, although you can think however you'd like on that. But instant reaction is, this could be a very bad thing. If you're not a Browns fan, this could be very entertaining. And we can dive a little deeper into this, but don't forget what the NFLPA had said if the NFL did appeal and issues what they were looking for the entire time in an indefinite suspension. The NFLPA has said they will sue and take the NFL to court, exposing all the owners and the dirt they have on 3 notable owners in the NFL, as well as many other higher ups throughout the National Football League. But instant reaction, Mitch, is if he is suspended more than 6 games, which 90% chance I'm going to guess is what's going to happen, the Browns season will be a wash. You cannot win with Jacoby Brissette as your starting quarterback more than 8 weeks. And it's just a shame, but there's still so many loopholes we can go through. I'll get your reaction before I keep going.
No, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, where we didn't completely count this out when the announcement was made on Monday, which was sort of like the Monday morning where everybody got up really early to make sure they were on top of the news when it happened. And when I heard it was 6 games, I was like, okay, that's for Browns fans, that's not really a loss because that's just over a third of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at the teams that you would play to start off, it's not like you couldn't have won those games without maybe some key pieces missing. You're going up against teams that may not be getting off to good starts, especially at the beginning of the year. And now it's different allegedly different, because the NFL now looks to be trying to actually fight back on this, because what I remember from this whole saga during the offseason was there was a little bit of perception where the league made it seem like they were trying to get themselves ahead of a situation like this more than they actually were, or at least more than they actually cared about it. Because in the past, there have been some examples of the league making decisions on matters like this, like the Ray Rice situation, where there was public outcry that the league didn't do more to handle very sensitive situations like this. Now, I'm very curious as to if a case like this would go to an extensive trial, what both sides would have to go through in a case like this, and if there is going to be a more extensive suspension for Watson, it's going to be very, very difficult right now. I think even going from 6 games to 8 games makes a big difference, let alone if the league were to get the suspension into double digits, if not to that indefinite ban that they originally wanted out of all this.
No, you're 100% correct. And the first thing I'll touch on is if it goes from 6 to 8, that is a huge difference alone, because the 2 games that Deshaun Watson would have gotten to play if it stayed at 6 games are 2 division games. At Baltimore and then home Monday night on Halloween against the Bengals. Those are huge games, right? Listen, in the NFL, every single game is huge. It isn't a long season like basketball or baseball. But your division games are always the key point. And you only had one in those first 6, and it was at home against the Steelers on Thursday Night Football. Right. You had to think your team would be ready to play that game regardless of who was playing. But to your point, the first 4 games of the season, I don't care who was playing quarterback as long as I didn't have to go through the Johnny Manziel experience again. I would have taken Baker with one bad shoulder again against those 4 teams. I would have taken, I don't know, Odell Beckham Jr. on one ACL looked pretty good throwing the football last year. It didn't matter. Game 5 against the Chargers was going to be tough. Game 6 against a Bill Belichick-led Patriots team, always tough. But now you're talking about the unknown. And if it is 8 games, you're going to be in trouble. And if it's anything more, Mitch, I'm afraid the season is washed, because Jacoby Brissette is a very fine backup quarterback. But the key word there is backup quarterback. He's not a starting quarterback in the NFL. He has been thrown into the fire in numerous situations. You look all the way back to his first tenure in New England when Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt when Brady was suspended. Then he goes to Indianapolis, and Andrew Luck just decides to retire randomly one August night. And he did all right. Now, is this the most talent he's had around him? Yes, probably. But the question is, can he take you to the playoffs? And I just don't know if he can. Not in a loaded AFC where you're talking sometimes, does 10 wins even get you a wild card spot in the AFC right now?
Yeah, it's very tricky, and I like that you made that last point about the AFC right now, because this is maybe one of the strongest conference levels that the AFC has been in a long time, and it's been that way for a bit, since teams like Kansas City and Buffalo all of a sudden became these offensive juggernauts, and you've seen the teams that have been representing in the Super Bowl over the last few years. As far as that schedule goes, you just made the point about about Jacoby Brissette. I look at Jacoby Brissette as a guy that could be a starter, but he's never going to be necessary as a starter. And there have been examples before of very talented teams that have been in dire situations without their starting quarterback and got to a certain point where it was close for them to make the playoffs. Now, the most recent example for me was Matt Castle back in 2008 when Tom Brady tore his ACL in the first game of the season and ended up having to miss the rest of the year. New England was 9-7 that year and almost made the playoffs. But obviously, if Tom's in that situation, they're atop the conference probably, alone with the AFC East. With Jacoby Brissette, if he were to have to play more of this upcoming year, I already thought that the pinnacle, the apex rather, for a 6-game suspension for Watson, followed by him returning for the last 11 games of the year, I could probably have given a record of around, let's say, 10-7. 10-7, because if you go around 500 in those 6 games, 3-3, you could have the potential where Deshaun wins you 7 more games. Not very unlikely, even with the competition that you would have to face, especially in November, where I was looking at that stretch. You have teams like the Dolphins in there, then you have the Bills in Buffalo, at home against the Buccaneers, then you have the Texans, rather. Then you have a bunch of division games there at the end. I'd be very hard pressed. And Jacoby's got some ability. It's not like it's an inexperienced rookie going out there and having to basically just be thrown to the fire like a Deshaun Kaiser from a few years ago. This is a case of a guy who's been in the league for a while. He's not completely inexperienced. He has enough ability to keep getting jobs in the league, but obviously there's a huge difference in getting your Pro Bowl caliber quarterback under center for the year against a guy who probably would max out at maybe 25th out of 32, 35 quarterbacks in the league every year.
No, you're absolutely right. And I want to make sure my stance is clear. I am not calling Jacoby Brissette a bum. I'm not saying he's not good. First off, if you're in the NFL, you're better than anybody that's telling you you're probably not very good. Second, there's a large enough sample size right now to know what he is, though. And if he can take care of the football, look, last year you were just average quarterback play away from going to the playoffs, right? Even Baker hurt at times last year was still fine. Everything went downhill furthermore once he was body slammed against the Cardinals with J.J. Watt and got that shoulder even more messed up. If Jacoby Brissette does not turn the football over and your wide receivers stay healthy, which the wide receiving corp is already very weak, a lot of question marks there, you have the best tandem running back duo in the NFL. You have one of the top 5 offensive lines, and you return almost your entire defense from last year while bolstering it throughout the draft and free agency and other spots. So if he plays mistake-free football, yes, this team could still make the playoffs. But the question is, as we've seen over Jacoby Brissett's career, can he play mistake-free football? And can the Cleveland Browns not outthink themselves and run the damn ball? There's hats, there's shirts, and you even saw John Johnson III tweet out on Christmas last year in Green Bay, run the ball. And sometimes I worry that when you have a staff like the Browns do with Kevin Stefanski, they are all about this analytical approach. Sometimes I feel like the analytics get in the way of a game when you're playing football. Football, sure, you can incorporate analytics, but at the end of the day, it's football. Who's going to get down and dirty in the trenches, who's going to hit the hole and run, and who's going to make the form tackles and stop and break up passes here and there. And that's what the Browns are going to have to do. They're going to have to rely on the defense. And Mitch, I don't know, but this might be one of the best defenses I can remember in our lifetime as a Cleveland Browns fan. And they can still do it, right? We've seen teams do it all the time. Like you mentioned, the Patriots, even going back now, smaller sample size, but the Philadelphia Eagles winning the Super Bowl after MVP candidate Carson Wentz tears his ACL. Nick Foles takes that team, wins a Super Bowl. It's not common. It can happen. But man, oh man, would it help if you had your Pro Bowl quarterback who, let's not forget, just 2 years ago, led the league in passing without DeAndre Hopkins on the roster.
Yeah, and he's going to be coming into a Browns receiving core that's a little banged up right now, and he'll have considerably more talent. I mean, you got Amari Cooper in there, and I want to touch on that when we get to the next segment. I also want to get into what our thoughts were on the initial suspension, obviously, and we'll get to that right after this break. First,
when others treat your fries as an afterthought, all you're left with are cold, soggy fries. That's why Wendy's new fries are ones you won't forget, guaranteed to be hot and crispy, or we'll replace them. We're talking natural cut, skin-on fries, perfectly seasoned with a hint of sea salt. In fact, they're even preferred almost 2-to-1 over McDonald's. These are fries so hot and crispy, they beg a new question.
What would you like with your fries?
Try them today, only at Wendy's.
At participating U.S. Wendy's, taste preference based on a national taste test by an independent research company.
You deserve the best. And at Ferris Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac, Toyota, that's what you get. We consider you, the customer, to be part of our family. Anybody can make promises, but when you visit Ferris, you get the Ferris deal from a Ferris wheel. So if you're looking for a car, truck, or van, think Ferris. Think Ferris!
We all have 206 things in common. Our bones keep us up and moving. And we at Cleveland Clinic Union Hospital care about every single one of them. From the tip of your finger to a brand new hip, our orthopedic experts will keep you going while keeping you safe. For every break and breakthrough, for every bone and joint, for every care in the world. Get the care you need when and where you need it. Visit unionhospital.org.
The Furby Electric Supply Company has bright ideas for your home. Save money by converting to energy-efficient electrical products or add ambiance with beautiful lighting features. It begins with a professional consultation and a visit to the Furby Lighting Showroom. Then certified Furby contractors complete your project right and on time. Since 1934, 4 generations have built a reputation of quality and trust, and they offer emergency services too. Just visit Furby.com. That's F-U-R-B-A-Y. The Furby Electric Supply Company.
And we're back here on the Big Time Sports Podcast Show. Mitch Spinell, Mitchell Balla, here to talk about a number of sports topics throughout the week, including the big one that broke as we were recording this episode, the 6-game suspension for Deshaun Watson that was ruled on Monday by Judge Sue Robinson is now being appealed by the National Football League. It was announced just a few minutes ago. Now, I was reading up some more information on here. Of course, the league union, the players union, has 2 business days to respond to the appeal. The commissioner or his designee may overturn, reduce, modify, or increase the discipline previously issued, and that is final and binding to all parties involved. So basically, the NFL and the players union decide, let's bring a third party in to make a decision on whether or not this case warranted a suspension. They ruled it was warranted a suspension, and now they're like, okay, we didn't get what we wanted, so now we're just basically going to do the whole thing over again with somebody that we're going to appoint. So it really is frustrating here, but that's because we are obviously based in Northeast Ohio, and we are both Browns fans, obviously. You got the whole thing in the back there. I have nothing in my room right now, but trust me, I am. As far as the suspension goes, I remember gauging the public interest from when this announcement was made. Now, obviously, public opinion is public opinion, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's that old saying: if something is popular, it doesn't mean it's right. If it's whatever the saying is, but basically, I'm going into the response that I saw yesterday. It was kind of mixed from what I remember, because there was a number of people who thought, okay, this is a decision that was carefully thought out and carefully researched by all the parties involved. Some people thought, hey, this was way too much for a guy who was never charged criminally. Remember, there were 2 district courts that decided not to file charges against Watson, and then you have another party that says, you know, all of those accusations are all of those exact accusations, and they were a lot, allegedly, and it did not result in a punishment that should probably to the people who were arguing this that it should have resulted in. So I want to get your thoughts on this, Mitch, because it was so difficult for me at least to rule whether or not this was considered a suitable punishment, because we don't really know for certain if there were actions that warranted this. And I do remember the judge in her rulings, there was some it was along the lines of, and I will get it here in a second, it was along the lines of the behavior crossed the line, but it was not in a violent form. I want to get your thoughts on that while I get the official wording on that.
No, so listen, getting the news was one thing, right? 6 games. As a Browns fan, I was happy with that, right? At the end of the day, I figured he would be suspended. But seeing 6 games and reading Judge Sue Robinson's report, it was pretty eye-opening, right? She says that Deshaun took part in egregious behavior, crossed the line, did a lot of things where what he's being accused of to a degree is true. But at the same time, there was still a lack of evidence, especially by the NFL that went to her and gave her a newspaper article that she threw out. A newspaper article, people, is opinionated. That's not factual evidence. If you go to somebody that doesn't like Deshaun Watson and use their article, well, that doesn't really help your cause. There's 2 ways to look at it. You could say, based on the fact that he did not get criminally charged twice in 2 separate districts in court in Texas, why should he be suspended? There's the other side that says there's no way this many women are lying. I see both sides. I am a Browns fan. I am all for due justice. I am all for whatever happened, making sure the people that were harmed in it are taken care of. And I don't just mean by financial reasons. I understand that 23 of the 24 settled, but that's not what I mean there. I just mean that, they're able to live their life the rest of the way they want to. You don't know what kind of toll that takes on a person. At the same time, though, Mitch, we've seen things before in years past, before we've had this new look with the NFL and NFLPA going outside to a judge to rule on it. Ben Roethlisberger got 4 games appealed down to 3. Ray Rice, who you saw the extremely graphic and disturbing video of him punching his girlfriend in an elevator, got 2 games. You saw the actual proof of that assault, and he got 2 games. We have no way to prove that Deshaun Watson, with video or audio, sexually assaulted any of these women. However, you've heard the entire time, Commissioner Roger Goodell still wants to clean up the mess that he left behind years ago with the Ray Rice situation. And to me, that is so extremely unfair to try to fix a mistake you made years ago and pin it on somebody else right now, that after a federal judge who's had some of the biggest cases nationwide during her time ruled that it's a 6-game suspension for lack of evidence. Now they're appealing. I don't want to say it's like they have an agenda out there, Mitch, but it's almost nearing those lines where they want to prove a point. But at the same time, us Browns fans are going to feel the brunt of it because we're fans. And right now we don't know who our quarterback is. There's a chance we don't see Watson at all in 2022. There's a chance we see him back at some point. There's a chance he starts week 1. And I'm sure we'll get into that next segment as well. But to you now.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I got the writing right here. Robinson did conclude that Watson engaged in quote unquote non-violent sexual assault. She also found, based on past precedent, that a non-violent sexual assault does not justify the kind of punishment which the league sought, which of course was an indefinite suspension of at least 1 year. So it really is. This might be the most gray area case we have seen probably since something like Roethlisberger, who I think it might have been actually 6 games that got pared down to 4, if I'm not mistaken.
That might be it too.
Yeah, but I remember, and you got to remember the time too. There was a notable difference from what I remember, even as a young kid, in the kind of culture regarding cases like this involving professional athletes or really anybody nowadays. And because there's been more of an awareness of these types of actions around in our culture, basically, there is a sort of push to make sure that those who do commit those sort of heinous actions are metaphorically buried underneath the prison, basically. Back then, it doesn't even feel comparable right now because for years Browns fans always used to say, oh, well, Roethlisberger always got 4 games. We really said that because we didn't have any hard evidence on him, because we didn't like the guy, because he always beat us every
Right.
2 times a year.
Our team sucked.
Yeah, and now the shoe's on the other foot, and I have Pittsburgh friends who I have talked to before who have said, oh, you get ready for it now. You're gonna get it for the next 10 years. And I'm like, oh, you're telling me he's gonna play for 10 years and he's gonna do that well? I'll take that then. But the whole point is, it's really tricky, and I'm wondering what the extension of a federal trial would be like for this. Not to mention that Watson at this rate still has to go to court for the one remaining case that he hasn't settled, and we'll see if the NFLPA decides to appeal the appeal of the decision. Basically, I think they have 2 days to do that afterwards. So I don't know. I'm very curious as to what happens. Watson obviously was at Browns camp today. That's where our focus should be. But obviously we've had this crazy offseason. The Browns are basically. I know that a lot of the guys in the front office are especially dealing with this right now. I'm just hoping that, as hard as it might be, the players and coaches right now are just focusing on preparing themselves for the preseason and the regular season. So we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about this, maybe get into some baseball and some other topics as well. But first,
Buying a home has never been so affordable with record low interest rates. Hartzler's Quality Housing is ready to put over 40 years of experience to work for you. Family owned and operated since 1978, Hartzler's has a wide selection of model homes on site with a knowledgeable team to help make your new home a reality. Open 6 days a week. Visit them off I-77 in Dover or online at hartzlers.com. Hartzler's Quality Housing. Quality from start to finish.
You invest a lot in your home and vehicle purchases. Van Nostrand Young and Associates want you to feel secure should anything happen to those investments. We partnered with providers like Grange Insurance and other industry leaders to be sure you're presented with the most complete coverage to fit your needs. Because we're not only here to protect the items you invest in, We're here to protect your future as well.
Call Van Nostrand Young Insurance in North Canton at 330-497-1867.
It takes a lot of practice to have a winning team. Albin Title has over 100 years of combined experience handling real estate, title, and escrow transactions. They serve Tuscarawas, Stark, Carroll, Harrison counties, and more. So choose Albin Title for your next home refinance, sale, or purchase. They'll get it done quickly and professionally. Contact Albin Title at 330-334-5800 or visit their website albintitle.com. Let them put their experience to work for you.
You asked for it and we listened. Buckeye Career Center is now offering Certified Nail Technician as an adult education program. This 216-hour course begins in November and will run Tuesday through Thursday evenings from 5 to 9 p.m. Learn manicures, pedicures, infection control, salon operations, and more. Other part-time certification courses starting this fall include phlebotomy and welding. Call 330-339-2288 to register or visit BuckeyeCareerCenter.org for more information.
Getting back here to our talk here on the Big Time Sports Podcast Show, Mitch Spinell and Mitchell Balla. So we were talking the first two segments about the ruling that was just announced a few minutes ago. Not the ruling, but the appeal of the ruling of Deshaun Watson. The NFL is going to appeal the 6-game suspension that was handed to Watson down on Monday. And reading through all the stuff here now and as to what could occur, we've been talking about the possibility of Watson's suspension getting even further extended to more games. We talked about the possibility of a federal trial because the NFLPA did make a statement that they could file a federal suit, which could lead to months and months of legal processes. And they could even file a junction in which that they could keep Watson on the field during this time, basically to appeal the suspension. And I'm very curious as to where this will go because obviously the NFLPA made a statement back on, I think it was Sunday night, that they were not going to appeal the decision either way. And then we took a few days to find out the NFL would make that decision, as we kind of stated in the previous segment. It really seems like they're trying to get themselves ahead of a situation like this because of things that have happened in the past. And that's not, I take that back. I shouldn't say that the NFL is trying to do this because solely of the mistakes they've made in the past. If you're a major organization like the NFL, you want to handle this matter as best as you possibly can regardless. People are always going to bring up the situations involved in the past, like the Ray Rice situation, involving also those involving Ben Roethlisberger and Ezekiel Elliott, which I don't think those cases went to any sort of trial. And not to mention, the NFLPA could even bring in the information, the situations regarding certain NFL owners, that have been kind of caught in these sort of sticky situations in the past few years. And people are going to basically be saying, "Oh, why didn't you guys do anything about this? Why don't you do this?" Obviously, it's because the league and the commissioner work for the owners, basically. But that is a tricky area for the league to kind of work around, especially if they go to trial on this. And I don't know. Again, we're trying to figure out what's going to become of Deshaun Watson's fate for this season and how the Browns are going to work around a situation like this. And Mitch, I'm very curious as to how the team is handling itself during camp. I mean, obviously you hear the same things from Coach Kevin Stefanski especially, and a number of the players, where it's like, we're not focused on that right now. We're just focused on making ourselves better, getting the game, getting ready for the games and all that. But it's systemic at this point, where it just kind of creeps down from the front, from the league offices to the Browns offices to down to the field potentially. And, certain dynamics are interrupted by this. You think you're going to go, it's not that the Browns thought for sure they would be going into the season with Watson week 1, because obviously they made the trade knowing that there was a possibility that this could happen. And that's another point I wanted to get to during the last break that I forgot about, is that you look back on when the Browns made the trade for Watson, and that was a day after reports had said that the team was officially out of the running for the race with a number of NFC South squads like the Panthers and the Saints, because you just didn't know what was going to be of the factors in there. There was like some financial issues, and then all of a sudden Browns put their final offer on the table and they turned the NFL upside down, basically. So it makes me kind of wonder, what if we lived in the reality where a deal hadn't been at the last minute pushed onto Watson? What if we had just left this to another team? And the easy answer is, oh, well, then we wouldn't have to worry about this. We'd just be going in with Baker this next year, and everything would be still up in the air. Still a lot of questions there, but I want to ask you what you think life would be if this decision had not been made to get Watson, and then we wouldn't have had the offseason like we had.
First off, I just want to say you hit like 7 major points right there that we could probably have a full-on 4-hour show on just those topics alone.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much you can talk about this. But to your point, Mitch, and you see it on social media, would you redo the trade if you could? You know, if you went back 6 months ago, what would you do? And here's where I stand. Because to your point, you know, how are the players dealing with it? You hear the same thing from Kevin Stefanski every day, and that's great. But let's be honest here. Everybody has social media. Everybody has a TV. Everybody knows what's going on. So Kevin Stefanski saying, oh, you know, we're going to respect the process. No, cut the crap, Kevin. All right. We know what's going on. We know all the players know what's going on. We found Judge Robinson's entire report on Twitter. You don't have to go to a website for that. You're telling me nobody on the Browns has Twitter? Nobody has Instagram? It's a lie, because I follow half the team on the social media pages. Mitch, I would 100 times rather have a conversation on if Baker Mayfield is the guy or not, and was last year an anomaly with his shoulder, than have to worry about this. Because not only do we get into it with our own fans about, you know, is Deshaun Watson this? You've turned off an entire part of your fan base. You've turned off about half the city of Cleveland. And then you've allowed, which really is no one's fault, but you've allowed us to be vulnerable now from all other NFL fans that we know. And it's not right, because like I said in the very opening of the show, you and I did not trade for Deshaun Watson. You and I did not offer him $230 million guaranteed. We didn't do that, but we're fans of this team, and we're going to stick by this team, and we're going to wait to see who's throwing touchdowns or who we're getting upset with and who we never want to see play on the Browns again after they make a mistake. But you can only help but wonder, right? Every year with Baker Mayfield here for 4 years was a roller coaster. And I'm not talking about the top thrill dragster where you go up for 2 seconds, you come back down. I'm talking about one where the dragster's about 5 times the height of that and then 10 times the depth of that, because it was a roller coaster ride with Baker Mayfield. I was a Baker believer once we drafted him. I thought that's exactly what the city needed. And I think he ultimately proved he was the right guy for a certain amount of time. Last year, you can put the blame on whoever else you want. We could have a whole nother show about that. But if your biggest talking point this offseason was, is Baker's shoulder ready? Can we get 2020 Baker back? I would much rather have that, because at the end of the day, everything we're talking about with Deshaun Watson right now, nobody knows the answer. And that's what hurts the most as Browns fans, right? Usually we would know if we were going to suck going into the season. When we went 1-15, we thought, okay, maybe we'll win 2 games this year. Well, no, we went 0-16. But there's so much promise with this team right now with Deshaun Watson. And at the same time, we might get the same old Browns situation where this team might not be anything because we don't have a quarterback this season that we intended to have.
Yeah, I think this is a case, and you always hear this about when teams make these huge acquisitions or they make these deals potentially around trade deadlines or in the last year of their serious runs at contending for a championship, is that, especially if you haven't won one in the past, is that you always hear that saying, the time to win is now. This is the year. And I don't know if that statement has applied to a team more in the NFL in the last few years than the Cleveland Browns, because since 2018, when you had that first burst of Baker Mayfield breaking the rookie touchdown record, crawling that team out of the hole that was 1-33 basically in those previous 2 seasons, it looked like the team was on its way up. And then you have the 2019 season disappointment. 2020, you deal with all the nonsense there and have maybe no doubt the best Brown season since the return in 99. 2021, disappointment. So it's this narrative year after year of people thinking the Browns are finally going to make the jump, and then it does, and then it doesn't, and it does, and it doesn't. And then to add to that, you make a move that not only kind of turns away a huge, I don't want to say a huge portion, a notable portion of your fan base, but you're turning away a lot of people as well. I've seen comments where it's like, "Oh, remember when we used to want the Browns to succeed because it was so easy for other people to see the team as a punching bag." Now you're seeing it as, okay, this is a talented team, but they're also, everyone's was saying, selling your soul in order to get this championship, which I'm sure a number of other teams have done in the past, not just at the professional level. I don't know if it's ever been at this sort of public level before, level of public knowledge. I'm just saying that this is I'm not saying, and that's the thing, I'm not saying this is the year to win too, because depending on the suspension, we don't know if the Browns will actually be in contention this year. But this particular regime, this particular era, 2022 onward to say maybe around 2027, 28, unless something catastrophic happens, Deshaun Watson gets banned from the NFL, or Nick Chubb has a paragliding accident, or Denzel Ward falls into the Grand Canyon, basically. There is no excuse now, for me at least, as to making sure this team wins more and wins something significant.
Right.
Because if you go through this entire era and it doesn't equate to much, if anything, that is really, really hard for a fan base to come back from. Even with a fan base that has come back from decades of disappointment, decades of nonsense, and decades of flat out losing and flat out not contending.
You're absolutely right, Mitch. You're absolutely right in everything you said. And the big thing I want to say is we don't know. That's what you just said. We don't know. Nobody knows. Not even the NFL appealing right now, thinking they're going to get what they want. Although they probably have some sort of idea they have, because Roger gets to pick who's going to make this ruling. And I'm not going to be surprised one bit when all of a sudden it's exactly what the NFL wanted from the jump. But at the same time, we don't know. And does the NFL, who, like you said, public opinion, the NFL is all about their image, right? They don't want this mess on their plate anymore. They have egg on their face. They don't want to deal with this anymore. They want to fix the public image from everybody around the world, NFL fans and non-NFL fans included. But how deep will they go? How deep will they go? Are they going to call bluff on the NFLPA, or are they going to do what they want to, and then the NFLPA is going to take them to court and say, hey, excuse me, in your conduct policy, it says owners should be held to a higher standard than coaches and players. Because if they do that, Mitch, I told a couple buddies the other day, 95% of me is going to be very, very upset as a Browns fan if Deshaun Watson is suspended indefinitely. That other 5%, I'm getting my popcorn, I'm getting my laptop, my phone, and my TV, and I'm sitting in front of all the news outlets, because if the NFLPA takes the NFL to court, this is going to get messy. Because you have 3 owners that have been in some shady situations before, and I won't go into detail what they have allegedly done, but Dan Snyder of the Washington Commanders, Robert Kraft, who kind of was in the same situation a few years ago, getting caught down in Miami, and Jerry Jones covering up mistakes in Dallas with some of his personnel in the front office. You're talking about 2 of the most iconic franchises in the entire NFL, the one that's worth the most in the Cowboys, and the one that's won the most Super Bowls in the New England Patriots. And so that's why part of me just wonders, if the NFL goes for indefinite for a full season, I 100% expect the NFLPA to go in and take them to court. Now, if they just add 2 games, maybe 4, then you have to kind of wonder, is it worth it for the NFLPA? But at the end of the day, the NFLPA is supposed to represent all their players, no matter what level it is. And you're talking right now about when healthy and when playing, a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. This could get a lot messier than what people want to think. And I'm not just talking about the Cleveland Browns. I'm talking about as the National Football League as a whole.
No, I'm happy you mentioned the 2 games, because if I had to put a significant portion of money as to predict what could become of a federal trial like this, I would anticipate 2 games, and there was no fine when the ruling came about. I could see easily being a $5 to $10 million fine in all this, because it would make the NFL seem like it was really trying to clamp down on the issue, which again, I think partially they do want to, and it would give Watson more of a hurt than it was probably anticipated at first. It's almost like the reverse of what happened with Roethlisberger a few years ago. We mentioned the 6-game suspension to start off, which was considered very significant at the time for a case that for cases that were 2 cases, I believe, that were settled. And then once the season wore down, like the offseason wore down, Roger was like, you know what, here, just take 3 games, take 4 games, whatever you got. You've been behaving. Let's just go ahead. Don't do it again. That would not fly in today's climate, I believe. But I see it as, okay, you have the 6-game suspension. Some people believe it should be more, so that's how much it's going to be. I don't personally believe it's going to be indefinite, but you can't rule it out. I know, but I can't see the NFL really making a landmark ruling like that, because then it would likely set a major standard in terms of future cases. So obviously, those who are listening, what are your guys' thoughts on that? I mean, you can comment. Well, you can't comment on a podcast, I don't believe, but I think we can set up something on Anchor. SoundCloud, you can.
SoundCloud, you can.
And you can tweet at us at Mitch Spinell, and then your Twitter, Mitch.
At Mitchell Balla.
At Mitchell Balla. So we have 2 basic names, basically. So yeah, that's what I like. I like that we're getting this conversation out, and we'll get into more after the next break, including some baseball. The Guardians won today, so we'll get to more on that, and also their trade deadline performance. But first,
if you're purchasing a new home, the team at Hartzler's Quality Housing is here to help. Take advantage of record low interest rates to make your new home a reality. Locally owned and operated since 1978, Hartzler's Quality Housing has the experience to guide you through the process. You'll find a wide selection of model homes on site to fit any budget. Open 6 days a week just off I-77. You can also visit them online at hartzlers.com. Hartzler's Quality Housing. Quality from start to finish.
Hard work is something you're accustomed to. Van Nostrand Young understands that principle. Our access is achieved with organizations like Grange Insurance. Safety and prevention specialists utilize our VanCan assessments process to ensure that you and your colleagues are in the best hands. You want the safest environment for your business, and we can guide you there.
Call Van Nostrand Young Insurance in North Canton at 330-497-1867.
If you're looking for a new or pre-owned car or truck, why not see the Parkway Auto Group? Parkway is a special group of automotive experts with 8 brands to satisfy your needs. Come see the difference at the Parkway Auto Group on Commercial Parkway in Dover. 8 brands and 1 family. It's Parkway Auto Group.
Fall is in the air, and part-time career enhancement courses at Buckeye Career Center are on the horizon. Registration is now open for Introduction to Beekeeping, Basic Small Engine Repair, and Sign Language. These part-time offerings run on Tuesday evenings and begin in November. Let Buckeye Career Center help you learn a new skill or advance your current skill set. Call 330-339-2288 for more information or to reserve your seat in one of these or our other part-time classes.
And we're back here on the Big Time Sports Podcast Show. Mitch Spinell and Mitchell Balla here, going more into local, statewide, and nationwide sports. So I want to get away from the Watson talk, because obviously we've gone through 3 segments of it. And at this point, it's basically, we know that the NFL is going to appeal the decision that was handed down on Monday for Watson, 6 games. From what I'm gathering through all the researching and all that, basically the NFLPA could file an appeal against the appeal. And if they do so, they could file the suit, and they could even, carry this out in federal court for months. They could even issue an appeal that could keep Watson potentially on the field. That includes week 1 and onward, depending on how the rulings would go out. And we shall see. We shall see what's going to happen in the case for not only Watson, but the Cleveland Browns season and maybe the rest of the NFL. But now I want to go over to baseball, where the Cleveland Guardians actually ended up winning today, I believe 7-3. I'd have to check that score, over the Arizona Diamondbacks, and that takes 2 out of 3 for their homestand. 7-4, rather. Excuse me. So the Guardians are now 54-50, just 1 game back, I believe, of the Minnesota Twins, still in the AL Central after the Twins ended up winning today over Detroit. So I really want to focus in on the trade deadline, which passed this past Tuesday at 6 p.m. There were some potential reports that the Guardians would possibly make a move, since they still are in the thick of not only the AL wildcard standings, but also closer, rather, the AL Central race, even though it's going to be very tough between Minnesota, Cleveland, and Chicago. the Guardians didn't really make any moves. They did end up trading catcher Sandy Leone to the Twins for pitcher Ian Hamilton, who's been up and down from the minors to the majors over the last few seasons. Mitchell, I was disappointed, obviously, by the Guardians not being able to make a move, and I think it was more so because teams pounced on those opportunities in the days leading up to it. I believe the Friday before, it was a trade of Luis Castillo from the Cincinnati Reds to the Seattle Mariners, who look like they're going all in for their first playoff run in over 2 decades. And there were other players mentioned there as well, and I'm wondering if a team like this can last through the remainder of the season. We have less than 2 months to go, and you mentioned, I believe it was Tyler Freeman who was brought up by the Guardians for today's game. So that is about a dozen rookies now who have made their major league debuts for the team this year at some point in some capacity. Obviously, some rookies have lasted longer than others, but it just seems like as great as scouting as the Guardians have, and as great a development as Cleveland has been able to get from guys who have been able to come up and become, go from potential rookies to more established veterans, it makes me wonder if a team like this can last for the next 2 months of the season, because I can't see them competing. And especially if you get to the playoffs, you're not competing with the likes of the Yankees and the Astros, and maybe not even the Mariners and Twins.
Youngest team in baseball. And that only got younger today with calling up Tyler Freeman, to your point. No moves made. And Mitch, I want to say I'm shocked, but at the same time, you and I both know better. Since we've been old enough growing up to realize what this team does, what ownership looks like, what the market looks like, hardly ever do they go out and get somebody. This is a youth movement, though. You can look at it one of two ways. You could say, hey, this team is way too young to try to get to the postseason. They might fall off and collapse. I mean, some people are calling them the kindergarten inners because they're so young. They're younger than most AAA teams when it comes to the age as a whole. And you still have someone old like Luke Maile and Brian Shaw on this team that brings that age up a little bit. But there's also the other part that says they're so young, they don't know any better. They might go out here and play baseball the way they've done it. And I don't know if people have realized it, but in the day and age of baseball right now, where everyone's talking about launch angle, everyone's talking about home runs, everyone's talking about who throws the hardest. Yes, we have a closer that throws 100 miles per hour, and he's the best closer in baseball, and I'll debate anybody on that. But this team hits, right? You look at some of these guys up here. Quan, rookie, doesn't swing and miss a whole lot. Obviously doesn't have a whole lot of power, gets on base. Oscar Gonzalez, we just saw him activated off the injured list. He had a home run today, but when he hits the ball, it's line drives. This team, under hitting coach Chris Felica, is kind of going back to baseball, right? Trying to hit for average, trying to get guys on, get them over, get them in. But at the same time, you wonder, they're so young. Did them not making a move, the front office, I mean, and Chris Antonetti, president of operations, and GM Mike Chernoff, did that hurt this team mentally? Were these young guys looking to go for a veteran? I'm not saying Juan Soto, he's not a veteran, but I'm not saying big name player, just somebody to come and help, because Jose is technically the veteran that's been there and done that in everyday position players, and he's not even 30. So I'm not shocked we didn't make a move, because I think this team is 1 year away. But my problem stems from, they did call the Washington Nationals, and the phone call didn't last 3 minutes because the Nationals wanted our number one prospect, the pitcher Espino. The issue I have with prospects is if you are close and you're talking about somebody under control, like Sean Murphy, for example, the catcher for the Oakland Athletics that we were rumored to be in discussions for, or let's just hypothetically out loud, let's think a generational talent, somebody that was an all-star and under the age of 24, and Juan Soto is now the first player ever in baseball to be traded at 23 or younger after being an all-star that same year. Those prospects better be up here next year helping us win, or else why would you not? You can't keep waiting. We have a great track record of success, and that's what's hard to argue this to any diehard Cleveland Indians / Guardians fan. But if those guys aren't going to be up here in the next 2-3 seasons to help you win, then get rid of them, because you're not getting any younger with the guys up here right now. I know they're young, but look at Jose. Yes, it's a 7-year contract. Yes, I'm biased, but I think he's one of the best players in baseball, and he's the most criminally underrated player in baseball every year. but you can't waste the prime years of Shane Bieber and Tristan McKenzie and Jose Ramirez and other players for your prospects, right? All our life, Mitch, as Browns fans, we've been told draft picks, draft picks, draft picks. We finally traded them away and we got a superstar quarterback, and we'll have to wait and see how that ultimately plays out. We made moves in 2016 with prospects, and some of those guys fizzled out. Other moves in 2017 and 18. Francisco Mejia, our number one prospect, we traded to San Diego. He's nothing now. There's no sure thing when it comes to prospects. And I'm just kind of up. I've had it up to here with us saying, well, we really value this guy a lot. You have 4 shortstops that are in your top part of your farm system. You don't play 4 shortstops. And they'll make a move in the offseason now. They'll make a couple subtle moves, and it's just frustrating as a baseball fan because I love baseball. It's my number one sport. Love it dearly. A team's 1 game out of first place in the American League Central Division. They're 1 game out of a wild card spot, and we stood pat while the 2 teams in our division made some sort of move to try to help them get past us.
Yeah, the Twins definitely made a couple of key moves that I was very curious about. And obviously you mentioned Murphy. Murphy, I thought, would be the one to get from Oakland, especially when you're dealing with some catcher issues. More so earlier in the season when you had to go to guys like Sandy Leon to fill in for a couple of games. And now I'm wondering what this team's going to be able to do, because you have a 4-game set with the Astros coming up here soon. That's not going to be easy. And then you have a number of key games throughout the rest of the season. I do believe that one of our division rivals here is coming up very soon, but I don't know. Again, you're 1 game out of the wild card race because Toronto right now is surging and Tampa Bay is sliding, and you're 1 game back of the Twins, and yet it doesn't really feel like. It almost feels like you're 4 or 5 games more back, because can you keep it up? Can you make this team keep going? And obviously Terry Francona is one of the top managers in the game still. I was at the game yesterday, and I sat in on Tito speaking in the pre and post game, and some of the other guys afterwards. And it was the loss, so it's kind of tough to gauge on that, but you definitely know the chemistry is not going to be broken up because nobody's really moving on to other teams. Nobody's having to come in and, disrupt something that the teams seemingly had going that was good. But you wonder if this particular core of players can work their way into not only making the postseason, but being at least somewhat competitive in it. Because if you just get in there and you're in this new wild card system for the first time ever, 3 in the first round, and you just get easily bounced like it's nothing, then it feels almost like a waste. It feels like when you played in the original wild card game format, and you would lose that opening game like the team did in 2013 to Tampa Bay. It almost just feels like a waste of playoff resources at that point.
You're absolutely right. And here's the thing. On paper, I think it's pretty safe to say you know who the top 4 teams in baseball are right now, and you know that some people are saying it's a flip of a coin. Me right now, just based off what I've seen, the Yankees are the favorite in the AL, and Dodgers, but now here come the Padres after getting a generational talent and adding Josh Bell and Josh Hader. But, Mitch, best team in the regular season means nothing. We saw it in 2017. We were the best team in baseball, and it wasn't even close, and we lost. The goal is to get to October and see what happens. In 2016, I still remember looking at predictions from, all the experts and writers.
Yeah.
Nobody picked us to go to the World Series. You know why? Oh, because David Ortiz is retiring. Big Papi farewell tour. Well, guess what? The goal is to get there and then see what happens. And this team, like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, is so young, they might not know any better. They might get hot. It's all about who gets hot at the right time, because in 2017, the Cleveland Indians got hot, winning 22 in a row, and they peaked too early. You see it in college baseball with Tennessee this past year. You can look at numerous years before. You can go back to my senior year in high school. We were 29-0 and got upset in the playoffs. You can be the best team, but in baseball, and that's what I love about baseball. Any given day, you win or lose. That's why you play 162. But in October, you throw the records out the window, and who's going to play the best baseball and who's the hottest team right now. And we could still do it. We could still do it 100%. This team is 4 games above 500, 1 out of the division, a wild card. It's just going to get harder, I think. And you've had so many question marks on what we thought heading into the season was your strongest part of your team in your rotation. After Shane Bieber and Tristan McKenzie, Mitch, I have no faith right now in anybody we throw out there that's a starter. Actually, call me crazy, and I know I'm going to get a lot of reaction to this, both from people out in the audience and friends that listen to this. Brian Shaw's 2-0 when he starts.
Yes, he is.
He has the same number of wins as Zach Plesac.
He does.
Just saying.
These are factual. This is factual information. And before you get any crazier, I do want to touch on that more when we get to the last segment. I also want to touch on some of the other major pickups from teams around the trade deadline that could have an impact. You mentioned the Padres. That's the one I'm definitely going to be talking about in the next segment. But first,
where you matter. You matter. Everyone plays a part. We all have a role. Each of us can make a difference. You do matter, and the best way to have a positive impact is to pay it forward. With each of us helping one another to cope, feel better, and know that we belong. Pass on the positivity today. Tell someone else they matter too. All care.
All care, all care. Where you matter.
We all have 206 things in common. Our bones keep us up and moving. And we at Cleveland Clinic Union Hospital care about every single one of them. From the tip of your finger to a brand new hip, our orthopedic experts will keep you going while keeping you safe. For every break and breakthrough, for every bone and joint, for every care in the world. Get the care you need when and where you need it. Visit unionhospital.org.
You deserve the best. And at Ferris Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac, Toyota, that's what you get. We consider you, the customer, to be part of our family. Anybody can make promises, but when you visit Ferris, you get the Ferris deal from a Ferris wheel. So if you're looking for a car, truck, or van, think Ferris.
When others treat your fries as an afterthought, all you're left with are cold, soggy fries. That's why Wendy's new fries are ones you won't forget, guaranteed to be hot and crispy, or we'll replace them. We're talking natural cut, skin-on fries, perfectly seasoned with a hint of sea salt. In fact, they're even preferred almost 2-to-1 over McDonald's. These are fries so hot and crispy, they beg a new question.
What would you like with your fries?
Try them today, only at Wendy's.
At participating U.S. Wendy's, taste preference based on a national taste test by an independent research company.
And we're back here for another segment here on the Big Time Sports Podcast Show. Mitch Spinell, Mitchell with Balla here, talking about some MLB trade deadline storylines. Obviously, the Guardians didn't do much to change the roster heading into the last 2 months of the season. And we mentioned before the break, you know, the team's pitching has kind of been at question throughout this point of the year. I mean, Tristan McKenzie and Shane Bieber have shown specs of being great talents as we've kind of hoped they'd be. The rest of the pitching staff, I mean, Cal Quantrill's kind of been in the middle there, but otherwise it's been a bit of a tougher year for what otherwise has been a very reliable rotation over the last few seasons. You mentioned Brian Shaw being 2-0 as a sort of makeshift starter. I'm, it's very hard for me to take into account a 8-year-old reliever now and what might be his last season, but the numbers, what's it saying? The numbers never lie. I'm going to keep an open mind on that. So I will consider it. I'll keep it in mind. As for the rest of the league, because there was a number of other moves that were made throughout the MLB trade deadline. The big one we talked about, Juan Soto going from the Washington Nationals, the last place Washington Nationals, to the, second place San Diego Padres. But second place does not rule what this team is. This is a juggernaut of a team now, potentially, with the likes of Manny Machado and Fernando Tatis already being on that team. And then you mentioned a guy like Josh Bell or Josh
Bell and
Harrison?
Hader.
Bell. Yeah, Bell and Hader. Yeah, Josh Bell and Josh Hader. I almost said Josh Harrison. Josh Bell and Josh Hader getting into there now. That's a really, really good team. And there were some other moves that I really was very curious about. I think the one that I want to mention, I'll let you get to one that we get to in a second. I was very curious about Noah Syndergaard getting dealt to the Philadelphia Phillies because that is a team that is not out of the race yet. They're a number of games behind the Mets and the Braves as of now, but they currently hold the third wild card spot in the National League, half a game ahead of the Cardinals. So that is my sort of curious pick. What was one that you were very curious in, Mitch?
Well, first off, let's just get a round of applause in here for the Padres, winning the trade deadline, trading for a generational talent, as well as Josh Bell, who I wanted to be a Cleveland Guardian, Josh Hader, who over the past few seasons has been the best left-handed reliever in baseball. Phillies, very under-the-radar move. Noah Syndergaard is not what he had been in New York, right? He's still a pretty good pitcher. Still probably the best pitcher the Los Angeles Angels have had over the past few years besides Shohei Ohtani, but that's not saying much because they never have pitching anyways. But you're right. A lot of people aren't talking about the Phillies, and maybe it's because Bryce Harper went down. Maybe it's because Bryce Harper's done. But they do hold on to that third wild card spot right now. Yes, the division race is, looking like a two-team race for the most part between the Braves and the Mets, but crazy things happen late in the year. We know that. The Mariners went in and made moves to get better, and I love it because they're a young team. They have some young phenoms on that team, and they said, you know what, let's go for it. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the longest postseason drought in all of baseball belongs to the Seattle Mariners. So hopefully we get to see some new blood in there. Mitch, there was one team that made moves, and they were getting better, and they were getting better, and then they made a move right at the deadline. And I'm talking like came across after 4 o'clock because, the paperwork wasn't through yet to announce it right away. The New York Yankees traded a pitcher. Their weakness on the team. They traded Jordan Montgomery to the St. Louis Cardinals for Harrison Bader. You traded the one spot on your team that you were already pretty weak in for a center fielder. Now you can look at it one of two ways. Giancarlo Stanton's hurt. Aaron Judge has a history of being hurt. Granted, he has not been hurt yet this year. And honestly, it's starting to turn into must-watch baseball every time he steps to the plate. And it kills me to say that because I hate the Yankees. But it really is. I mean, I don't want to, disrespect the 90s and everything, but, from what I've heard from my dad and his friends, but that McGuire Sosa, every time they came to the plate, you ran to watch to see what was happening. Every time Aaron Judge comes to the plate right now, you almost want to see what he's going to do because I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities of 60, 70 home runs this year, but that move made no sense to me because if anything, I think Aaron Judge has started to be a little more healthy because he has been in center field. Now are you going to move him back to right? And you kind of hurt yourselves, in my opinion, because couldn't Andrew Benintendi do that? Maybe not great as defensively, but he's going to be a better offensive player. Bader's just coming off the IL right now as he gets traded.
Yeah, I think Benintendi could be he is obviously a rental piece that the Yankees are using right now. So I do kind of agree with you in that it seems unusual for them to get rid of part of their pitching, but I think it was a piece that allowed them to not part with so many of their prospects. I mean, the guys like Anthony Volpe, Oswald Peraza, Jason Dominguez, those are top prospects that you don't have to give up for all the veterans that you got to bring in yet. Benintendi, Frankie Montas, Harrison Bader, Scott Effross, Lou Trevino. I think those are the pieces that you really want to focus on more because those are the pieces that were most needed for the Yankees heading into the last few months of the season, because this has been one of the most efficient Yankee seasons in recent memory. They are back on top of baseball for the first time in maybe 10 years, but there were some issues heading into potentially these playoff runs. And could they run into a team like the surging Blue Jays, like the Astros, I mean, we always make the joke Minnesota never wins in the playoffs. Who knows what would happen there? But I'm very curious as to what those guys will do. And if you have to give up Montgomery, it's like, okay, it's one guy. He wasn't like your number one. So it's not, to me, it doesn't have that huge loss factor. And I'd be more okay with it. Especially if the team really gets going throughout the next 2 months, where they're on pace for 108 wins right now. Aaron Judge could reach 60. I'm not saying 70. 60 at this point. 17 home runs over the last 2 months. It's not impossible, but you can always go on a cold streak. And that being said, he is efficient every time he comes up to the plate right now, it seems. And it's kind of insane the pace in which he's hitting these home runs. There might be like two home runs in a game nights occasionally, which just shows you how much he's racking this up as the season goes along. So I very much like to see what goes on there. And then you had to get rid of a piece like Joey Gallo, for instance, sending him to the Dodgers because he was just basically a black hole at the bottom of the lineup, especially this year. And it's unfortunate to say because this guy was a serious power threat in Texas and in his early days in New York. But yeah, I don't know. And then we mentioned the Twins. Go ahead.
The one thing I will say about Gallo that everybody wants to talk about is, oh my gosh, his hitting's horrendous. He's one of the worst hitters in baseball this year. To my knowledge, and it might not have been, this week, but a couple weeks ago, his WAR was still positive because people just forget he's actually a good outfielder. He actually is. He's had some Gold Glove caliber years. I'm not off the top of my head. I don't know if he won any, but he has an absolute cannon of an arm in the outfield. It just, Mitch, for someone like him, granted, he's going from big market to big market, but sometimes you just need a change of scenery, and sometimes getting out of New York is all you need. I mean, you've seen it in other sports before, and the one guy that comes to mind right now is Evan Ingram, who left the New York Giants for Jacksonville because he said, I couldn't take it. I didn't like playing there. And you read that really almost depressing report where they interviewed Joey Gallo, and he didn't leave his apartment. He was too embarrassed to walk outside in Manhattan because he didn't want people saying things to him. He said the fans booing to him got to him. And so what a lot of people seem to forget is these are humans too. They really are. And it's not like I don't know Joey Gallo personally. Listen, if Joey wants to come on the podcast, it'd be great. Just let us know. But I highly doubt Joey Gallo is going out there trying not to get hits every time. But you're right. They got rid of him too, and maybe that helps them because he was a black hole in the lineup whenever he was in there. And I don't want to say it, but who knows? What if it was a change of scenery? Now he goes to the Dodgers, and we're destined for a Dodgers-Yankees World Series.
We might be, and who knows what's going to happen in the last 2 months of the year. Also, I want to throw in tough break for Baltimore fans too, because it's not that the Orioles sold at the deadline. They got rid of Trey Mancini, who was maybe one of the most popular players on your team. Jorge Lopez, of course, going to the Twins, so that's an all-star closer that they get. You were 2.5 games. What was it? 2.5 games behind the third and last American League wildcard spot. You would think they would want to buy in because it's like Seattle, a team that has been struggling for so long, might want to make a run here at a postseason spot. I guess at this point, they're just trying to save it for next year and see if this team can come back. You hope they do, because otherwise it seems like a missed opportunity. But we shall see what's going to happen throughout the rest of the season. And before we go, we didn't get to it. We didn't get to one of these topics in our last episode because, it was just the matter of us trying to fit everything in. And I think it was my decision was I wasn't sure how to handle it at first, but the past week has seen us lose two very notable names in the sports world. One was NBA Hall of Famer Bill Russell this past Sunday. And then, of course, late last night, there was the news that broke that the Hall of Fame baseball announcer Vince Scully passed away as well. So that is those are consecutive gut punches to anybody who grew up wanting to watch, listen, discuss, or learn about sports, because you could be the most casual fan, and I think you would know names like Russell and Scully because they had an impact on their respective sports like very few others. Obviously Russell was arguably the greatest defensive player in NBA history, even dating back to where the league was so different than it is now. The winningest athlete in terms of championships in North American sports history, 11 times. Most guys can't even get one on there, and he has two whole hands, and then he has one extra for somebody else. It's kind of amazing to think about. And then obviously the stuff that he was very influential in culturally, and to see what has transpired in the 50, 60 years after that. And then of course you have guys like Scully, who were just these mainstays in baseball for so many years that the Dodgers, you don't get the story of the Dodgers without him, because he was such a mainstay in Brooklyn and then over to Los Angeles, to where people would tune in to listen to him, even if you weren't Dodgers fans, if you didn't live in the greater Southern California region, you wanted to hear him and his anecdotes. You want to hear him narrate some of the great moments, which he did with stories, with events like the Kirk Gibson home run, with many All-Star games and World Series events. It's a tough loss because, you know, it's just one of those, both of them, two of those people that are such mainstays in their respective sports for so long, and then to lose them is obviously a tragedy.
You lost, and this phrase or saying gets thrown around too much in my opinion nowadays, but you lost two GOATs, right? Greatest of all time. Bill Russell, arguably, it depends on, you know, people try to break down things, this, that, whatever, but I don't even want to talk about him as a player, but, you know, arguably some people could consider him the greatest of all time because he has 11 championship rings. Like, that's not, you won't see that again. You won't see it again. But what he did off the court in a spot like Boston, and in a time where African-Americans in basketball still really weren't welcome per se, when this happened, the things he did off the court, I mean, he was a hero to many. And you and I'm sure growing up, we looked up to athletes and said, oh, you know, like, he's my hero. But no, Bill Russell was a hero to so many people. And my one thing, and it doesn't even show how big of a hero he is, but the one thing I'll never forget is watching him hand that finals MVP to LeBron in 2016. That's the one thing I'll never forget. You and I weren't blessed enough to be able to watch Bill Russell play. And that's, you know, that's what kind of stinks. But you and I are old enough, and we are both in an industry that we're trying to break into, but we know who Vince Scully was. And if you have watched any baseball today, Thursday or Wednesday, August 3rd, or you're going to watch any baseball games after you listen to this, listen to the broadcasters, because my guess is they are all going to talk about Vince Scully, because when any broadcast team, radio or television, got to meet him, they got the best advice they've ever had in their careers from Vince Scully. And I listened to Matt Underwood and Rick Manning of Bally Sports Gray Lakes today talk about that. But Mitch, to your point, he was a storyteller, right? Baseball, we know, is a sport that has so much downtime in between pitches, but you would literally tune in to listen to games to see what kind of story he was telling, baseball or not. I mean, Hank Aaron's 715th home run, that's one of his most notable calls. You mentioned there's the Bill Buckner ball between his legs in the World Series of the Mets. There's just Kirk Gibson home run. There's so many calls. And I mean, the Hall of Famer, that's what he is. He's a Hall of Famer. But you're absolutely right. Two gut punches, no matter what type of fan you are. If you're just a fan of sports and a fan of great people, you lost two great people, two great role models, a great athlete, and perhaps the greatest baseball broadcaster or just sports broadcaster of all time in less than 5 days. And it is a big blow.
I do like the point you made about with Scully. It almost felt like his storytelling. It made it feel like he was scripting the events of the game as they were happening. It seemed too natural to really be happening. But the way you work in that industry for 67 years, you know your way around it. And I would highly recommend, if you haven't seen it, I have it posted to Twitter late last night. The last minute of his last broadcast, which I believe was in 2016. It was in San Francisco between the Dodgers and the Giants. It was basically him reciting a poem and a little anecdote there, and him signing off for the last time. And with Russell, I agree with you to not just reduce him solely as a player, which of course he was fantastic as. He was more than just a defensive player, but I think it was his choice to focus on defense, which is what made him so unique in his own legend, because he could easily put up 30 points, 15 boards, and a key number of assists, because he was unlike many other players in the NBA around that time. He could play above the basket if he wanted to. He was extremely athletic. He could move around well. He was one of the few guys that could actively stop Wilt Chamberlain from dropping 60 points per night on a bunch of smaller, slower players at that time. And it's unfortunate, and we hopefully will get athletes of the present and the future who, and not just athletes, I mean people who work in sports in general, who will leave as much of a positive impact as the figures of Bill Russell and Vince Scully did. So that is all we have for the second episode of the Big Time Sports Podcast Show. Obviously myself, Mitch Spinell, at Mitch Spinell. Mitchell Balla at Mitchell Balla. You got our socials there, and of course you're listening to this show probably on Anchor or Spotify or wherever you're listening to podcasts right now. And of course, the Big Time Sports Podcast Show is on YouTube, so you can check us out there. And of course, you can go to BigTimeSportsOhio.com and you can check out all of our articles and videos and stuff. And we'll have this posted on our socials as well. So we're gonna sign off here. I'm gonna try and take this last shot. See if I can get it right here. I got to make this one in honor for Bill. Maybe he'll guide it in for me. Well, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next time.